So, Heather, another disturbing week in the news, and this time it's not directly a function of Donald Trump. The Supreme Court had multiple rulings this week that were really disturbing in a myriad of ways, in ways that are going to impact the ability for minorities to vote in multiple states, maybe more than that going forward. The almost a two-tiered system of the First Amendment for one for people who are trying to provide abortion services and health services to women, and another for a more relaxed version for the those people lying to women about abortion services. We saw a ruling that will, at the very least, attempt to decimate public sector unions. How they respond is another question. That is a topic that we'll be talking about later in the program. But the biggest news when it came to the Supreme Court, and we should also say that Donald Trump has placed a record number of judges on the federal judiciary this time in his administration than we've seen in any past administration at a higher rate. And these are lifetime appointments. One of those people probably will be nominated to the Supreme Court because Anthony Kennedy, earlier this week on the final day, the session, the last day of the session of the Supreme Court on Wednesday of this week, announced that he would be retiring. This came as people reading the tea leaves had gone either way, but this is, I don't know. I know you have a silver lining, but tell us about the cloud first.
Well, I mean, I think that people have, understand that Kennedy retiring means the end of the swing to the extent that it ever existed, and it did in certain areas, that he was the guy that everyone sort of focused on, that he could go either way, which meant that there wasn't just an absolute doctrinaire down the line conservative majority on every issue. And he's a conservative, so they have had a conservative majority on many, many things, but there have been certain areas of the law, particularly when it came to the death penalty and, of course, abortion, where Kennedy has been the swing justice that kind of kept Roe versus Wade alive and was able to, kind of enact some curbs on the death penalty and certain, prison reform areas, both of which are extremely important, obviously, and affect many, many millions of people. So, his being on the court it's not been great. And if Obama had been allowed to have his vote for the Scalia seat with Merrick Garland, we would not be in this position. And the fact that Mitch McConnell was able to basically steal the seat for the conservatives, put Neil Gorsuch on there, with the retirement of Anthony Kennedy, we're looking at a very, very, very conservative majority on the court if they are able to, nominate and confirm a Trump nominee, which of course is highly likely to happen. I mean, there are ways that could not happen, but it's very unlikely that won't happen. So, I do have a slight silver lining in the fact that Anthony Kennedy has not been that swing vote in this past term in any way. And there was an abortion ruling during the term, the one that you mentioned earlier, about the idea that, people who are trying to prevent abortions are allowed to say whatever they want, and people who are trying to provide them are not permitted to. So, this is basically the new First Amendment limitation being placed on abortion rights, advocates and providers. So, I'm not quite sure we're going to see a difference. It seems to me that what happened, Kennedy somehow got, he changed. He became that doctrinaire right-wing conservative on the court for whatever reasons, who knows, but that's where he's been all term. So maybe the sad fact is that we all have to accept is that this had already happened, and his retirement is not really changing the trajectory.
Well, let me just push back on that. To some extent, I mean, I think people are going to reinterpret why the Supreme Court punted on these gerrymandering cases now, knowing that Kennedy is retiring. I think people are going to start to question what was behind that, because those were cases that Kennedy had been waiting for years, and had asked for a specific mechanism to tell about gerrymandering. It was delivered, and yet the court punted these. It's going to be interesting to sort of dig into those reasons. But here's the bottom line: is that as conservative as Kennedy was, now we have someone who is going to replace him, who is going to be even more doctrinaire than him. I mean, I think, Kennedy still looks better than Neil Gorsuch for a whole host of cases that did not show up this year. But even beyond that, even if I was to stipulate that Kennedy was as doctrinaire as Gorsuch, and I don't even say doctrinaire, because I don't even know that it was really a set of beliefs. When you have a guy like Gorsuch, it really, and if anything, this week's worth of cases showed that the law is highly mutable based upon what your desired outcome is. I mean, to say that Trump's proclamations about religion were not relevant to a Muslim, to this so-called Muslim ban, but the proclamations of one person on the Colorado, Civil Rights Committee were relevant when it came to whether or not a homophobic baker could bake a cake for a gay couple. But putting that aside, the big difference is that assuming Donald Trump is able to seat a new Supreme Court justice, even if it's just one more, the durability of that conservatism has been extended for generations. I mean, Clarence Thomas is up there in age. I think he's in his 60s. He's not anywhere near where Kennedy is, right? Who's in his mid 80s. And there's no reason to believe, maybe Clarence Thomas decides to retire, but I suspect if he does, he'll do it next year. While Trump is still president, and presumably we'll have a Republican Senate. But it's reasonable to expect the next Supreme Court justice is going to be sitting in that seat for 30 to 40 years, as will his or her, I would imagine it's a his, compatriots will be, Alito, Roberts, Gorsuch. They are all no older than early 50s, if that. And they will be on the court for another 20 to 30 years. We are talking about generations. And, there's a lot of cases that we don't even know about that get adjudicated on. We've seen this in the federal judiciary is full of young, completely ideological conservatives. This is very problematic, but we got to take a break. We come back. Let's briefly touch on maybe, how people should respond to this. And then let's talk about something positive, which was some good wins in the Democratic primaries around the country that I think those who are looking for a more progressive Democratic Party can at least have some solace this week. We got to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.